Good
Well,
afternoon,
oh,
look at that. Perfect
and good
timing.
afternoon, everyone. We are getting ready to get started. We're gonna probably do so in another minute or so. So we'll wait for everyone to get on the call, and then we'll make it happen. And to make it official. Everyone, I'm also going to put into the chat the NOFO website, which has links to great. Thanks, John. And by the way, John's back, everyone. Yay! He was on parental leave and now he is back. Totally a parent now. And so any words, John?
Day 2, back at work, got lots of dad brain going on, so forgive me if I misstate anything today. I can't be held responsible.
You have an overall disclaimer, at least for the next 3 months, right? Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump in. Thanks, everyone. If you're able to, like John stated in the chat, go ahead and feel free to introduce yourself. But we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So then that way we can get to all of our content as well as answer all of your questions. This is going to be a very packed conversation. And so we're excited to be talking about the notice of funding opportunity for rental housing with service priorities. This is both a training and a Q&A. We're going to do a second one on Wednesday the 26th from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Y'all are more than welcome to attend. And actually, before I get started, let me make sure that we are recording this. Okay, good. We are recording. And so then that way you can watch the recording, both of this one and the next one, if you need it while you're completing your applications. So like I stated, this session will be recorded and posted to our DCA YouTube page. So feel free to look there. It is probably it's going to be under the Home ARP list of videos. So definitely look to Home ARP. The PowerPoint will also be available on our Rental Housing with Service Priorities website. Give us a few days to get everything uploaded. We have a lot that we're going to upload there, including the core app and other. The core app, we're going to upload the emphasis link, which y'all need. And I'm going to go through that today. So yes, that's coming. And then also there was one other thing. Oh, the performance workbook that are all from the QAP that we're also asking you all to complete for this application. Ask questions throughout, just raise your hand and or use the chat. And what I'm going to do now, please respect this, but I'm going to change our requirements. Actually, after we get going and someone else is talking, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change our requirements. You guys could just take yourself off mute and go ahead and just ask your questions. So just give me a few minutes to make that happen. The Q&A survey will be available through the close of business on Friday, February 28th, to allow us time to answer and respond to everything that you have. Thank you, everyone who have submitted questions thus far. We're going to be publishing our first round probably tomorrow, no later than Monday. We do have to have a legal review before we send them. So we're just waiting on that. And we'll show you where the Q&A survey is. If you have any additional questions that cannot be answered in this particular training. Following the close of the Q&A, only questions or concerns related to application submission mechanics and emphasis will be considered. And for any application submission issues only, please email me at ilona.nagy@dca.ga.gov. And yes, there's only one I and one L in my name because fonts can be deceiving. Next agenda, we're going to go through every part of the NOFO, and then also have time for your additional thoughts and questions. So let's jump right in. The NOFO overview. So as y'all know, this will come with a low interest loan for your tax credit development, a favorable financing letter of support to be used in conjunction with your LIHTC application, either 9% or 4%. And then also an allocation of project-based vouchers through DCA's Housing Choice Voucher Program. And we have Laura Ann on, who's going to talk about that particular application as well. And so the terms, you guys have all seen this in the NOFO. We're going to be awarding up to $4 and $5 million. And the terms will be 15 to 30 years, depending on the funding source. And definitely the interest rates are going to be on a lower term, especially considering what interest rates are now. And I think we have a question, which is popping up. So give me a minute. Could you extend the deadline? Show one comment. Okay, so Laura Ann took care of that. Thank you, Laura Ann. Favorable financing letters. You'll receive a preliminary favorable financing letter, and applicants should apply to receive the maximum favorable financing points possible under the QAP. And our project-based vouchers must be submitted with the NOFO application, and I'll show you where. Most jurisdictions outside of DCA's Housing Choice Voucher Authority have agreements with DCA to port vouchers. So just know that if you're in like Macon, if you're in Savannah, Columbus, even public housing authorities up in the metro Atlanta area, we do have MOUs with many of them. So just be aware of that, which is great. If you have any questions, if we have an MOU to not port, just use the vouchers for project basing. Thank you for clarifying that, Laura Ann. I want to make sure that we say everything we're supposed to say the way we're supposed to say it. So yes, not port, but yes, having project-based vouchers in those jurisdictions. Eligible applicants. NOFO applicants must intend to use any award under the NOFO in conjunction with a tax credit application. The LIHTC application must encompass the same project as the NOFO award. Okay. Applicants must thus be able to apply for tax credits and be determined to be a qualifying certifying entity, and that deadline to become a qualified certifying entity for your LIHTC application is March 14th before the 9% round. And if you have a question around the MOUs for project-based vouchers, that is in the chat. Thank you. The performance workbook for project team qualifications is currently available under the housing tax credit page. And as you can see, those are eligible activities. The limitations. Each applicant may only submit one application for review under this NOFO. Applicants must choose which funding source they're applying for. DCA will evaluate each application to determine the feasibility of usage of the proposed funding in support of the respective programs. DCA reserves the right to utilize the resources listed and/or additional DCA resources, if available, to maximize loan efficiency as circumstances necessitate. And applicants must be in compliance with DCA's development and management requirements, be in good standing with the Office of Housing Finance, the Office of Portfolio Management, and the Office of Community Housing Development regarding any tax credit or home, National Housing Trust Fund properties or other federal funds, and any DCA and GHFA loans. These are the submission requirements. So the emphasis application, the link will be added to the NOFO website. Right after, I shouldn't say right after, but soon after this particular this webinar. Narratives, just make sure you also include a 2-page executive summary when you're completing your narratives. And we're going to go through all the narratives for each of our sections here. Evidence to support the rating factors include supportive housing experience supplement, referral information and MOUs, partnership agreements, and service budgets to see the supplemental worksheets. So we're going to show you that as well. All other documentation and evidence required by rating factors. The DCA LIHTC scoring application will be posted to the NOFO website and is currently available in the housing tax credit application. No need to complete the threshold and scoring tabs. DCA project-based voucher application will also be needed to submit. Operational support and underwriting. Projects must adequately plan for the long-term financial and physical health of the property. Projects must meet all QAP underwriting standards, including those but not limited to the Section 1 of threshold, and exhibits to threshold criteria. Each program under Part 1 and Part 2 has distinct additional underwriting requirements. DCA will perform an analysis of underwriting cost allocation, cost reasonableness, and subsidy layering analysis to determine fund feasibility. And during underwriting review, DCA will consider the following priorities of higher interest rate proposed by applicant, higher lien proposed by applicant, and shorter repayment period proposed by the applicant. So we're going to jump into Part 1. These are the eligible activities and uses for home ARP funds, which is primarily around Part 1. And the funding requirements is for 15 years. Oh, I apologize. And so the main focus around home ARP is really that 15-year amount of time in order to make sure that we are just aligning with what HUD had put forth for the funding. Let's see here. Focus is qualifying populations. We've already talked about those. Homelessness, at risk of homelessness, fleeing domestic violence, and sexual assault and human trafficking, and other households experiencing great risk of housing instability or possible return to homelessness. Project-based vouchers are for QP units. The home ARP 70-30 unit targeting, and we will talk about that a little bit and especially answer questions, but we've had a lot of great questions in your Q&As, and you guys will have a way to visualize that even further coming up. The budgeted funds budgeted for developer fee is permitted development cost under the home ARP program. However, DCA must review the fee and determine that it is reasonable. I'm so sorry I keep changing it back. I will take my hand off my mouse. A larger developer fee where a portion is used toward enriched resident services would be considered. And home ARP funds will be awarded in the form of a loan and in accordance with all relevant LIHTC and home ARP underwriting requirements. We have our underwriting policy as well for home ARP. This funding with certain tenancy types, such as HFOP and elderly, will be difficult to comply with familial status. So please be aware of that when putting together your applications. Initial eligibility for the unit is dictated by home ARP. Tenancy processes are dictated by the subsidy, such as project-based vouchers. Therefore, QP units fall under the tenancy requirements from project-based vouchers. There was some concern in the past around eviction requirements, and we confirmed with HUD that it really is based on the most restrictive, I guess layering into the unit, which would be the project-based voucher for QPs. Okay. The eviction questions before were more around if we did a if there was a cost reserve or an operations reserve for that unit. Therefore, if there was a capitalized reserve, therefore that particular unit could not have anyone evicted from it. But because we're not doing those operational reserves, we're doing project-based vouchers. That project-based voucher has the dictating requirements for tenancy. Okay. If you have further questions, let us know. Low-income home ARP units on the property, they would be considered the typical high home requirements for the tenancy. So it's just along with what you've done with home before with regards to termination and eviction, again, based on those questions that were had before. Let's jump into the application. And we don't seem to have any questions yet and no hands raised. So that is a good sign. So everyone just note that we are asking for a lot of narrative on this. So what I would probably say to that is please make sure that when you are completing the narratives, that they are very clear and answer the questions directly, just because we hope we're going to have many applications to review. And the clearer you are in your responses, the better we're going to understand what you want to do. And the potential for higher scoring is therefore open to you. So please be clear in how you express yourself with your application. And also planning is a really important thing, and we'll talk about that toward the end. Demonstrate that you as a developer have experience with projects that serve vulnerable populations with enriched services and low-income housing tax credit development. So we really want to see what you've done in the past. Demonstrate that the applicant has experience leveraging resources and compliance requirements similar to the home ARP funds being proposed. So just making sure, again, that you have experience, whether it's you as a developer and or the property manager, and or maybe a specific service provider that you've used repeatedly. So we would love to know your experience of really serving your tenants and what that looks like. And then also demonstrate that your property has experience providing housing and maintaining properties for vulnerable populations. So considering determining tenant eligibility and some of the specifics around that for home ARP specifically for the QPs, there are several steps that would need to be taken in order to ensure that someone is eligible for a unit. So we just want to make sure that your compliance department and your property managers are familiar with going through those steps. Address program participant complaints, coordinate with other service providers that may refer program participants to the units, maintain the properties to maintain your property well to prevent any unnecessary costly repairs, and covering replacement costs. Next, the strength of your project concept. So this really goes into, like I had stated before, really making sure that what you're putting together is something that has been planned. You're being proactive. You're thinking through all the steps and even thinking through not only your opportunities and good things that could happen, but also maybe some challenges that may come up. So describe your project concept in detail, again, to include the home ARP units, list the partnerships in your enriched service plan. And I'm going to go through that plan so you guys can see the information that we'll need. Include the experience of the enriched services providers, including on-site property management, if relevant, with a proposed service plan and budget. And this narrative should express your vision for the project, your understanding of the impact it will have on the community, and how each of the bullet points below contribute to that impact. And the bullet points are coming next. So site and location, thinking about where you're located and how that helps individuals. Oftentimes close to amenities is a big piece, but you guys all know that from what's that part at the end? Desirable and undesirable locations, those particular things. Is it a good location? Are the amenities good? Resident informed, have you talked with individuals with lived experience to kind of speak to how to develop your development? Local support, showing that you have support, maybe a GIC plan, your comprehensive plan from the area, any particular letters, including local government, referral partnerships, coordinated entry is a great one if you happen to have one in your area, and or your court, I was thinking COC. Your COC is another one too, if you're participating in that, and any other MOUs. Service provider partnerships, which the referral partnership speaks to as well. Additional community partnerships, so everyone that you're connecting with in the community. That could even be like your McKinney-Vento program at your local elementary school, middle school, high school. indicate types and frequencies of services. Fair housing, show how all the 4QPs will be served along fair housing regulations. Again, HUD has been really clear about wanting to ensure that fair housing in all of its developments are very strongly taken care of and represented. And then your implementation schedule, such as site control, environmental reviews, construction, anticipated date of the jurisdiction will be issuing this certificate of occupancy, date the property will be available for residents, and date services will be available to residents. Data informed, it would be great for us to know the location and the need. So if, for example, if you have 4QPs in an area, it would be great to know how many people have shaky housing in the area, how many people are doubled up and have unstable circumstances with regards to their housing. And so is there, what kind of need is there for the home ARP units? We all know that there will be a lot of need throughout the whole state. So just make sure you're demonstrating that. And all of this definitely goes into the specifics in the NOFO. What I do want to point to is for jurisdictions, PJs, participating jurisdictions that have already received home ARP funding. Part of that is they've already received home ARP funding. So demonstrating that you're leveraging your funds in order to include home ARP. And if you're using local funds from these participating jurisdictions, that would be great. Obviously, because this is considered, quotes, balance of state funds, we want to make sure that we're serving the entire state with rental housing funds. So that is going to be a consideration for when we're reviewing our applications. Does that, am I saying that participating jurisdictions will not be funded? That's not what I'm saying. But we are going to have a little bit more consideration toward other areas as well. Again, it depends on how you're crafting your entire development and your thoughtfulness put into it with regards to that too. So it's not just the location, it's the full potential program that you have and housing that you are presenting. So please consider the full package. Leveraging funding. Again, it would be great if there's options that you're considering, not just home ARP funds or National Housing Trust Fund or home, that you're looking at many different options to help build, including tax credits, but to build your property, your development. Optional supportive services. I know you all are very interested in this. This really is just kind of an overview of what you are needing. We are going to put up a list of options for, and essentially it's going to be out of the notice. So if you really want to find out, it's under supportive services under the CPD notice 2110. But essentially for home ARP supportive services attached to housing, you can go ahead. It's everything from childcare and food to first month's rent, deposits, things like that. So we want to make sure that you are working with an agency that is going to be able to help disseminate those services really well. So make sure that you have an MOU with that particular service provider, and that DC and the service provider will establish a written agreement contract for funding to ensure program compliance, record keeping, and payment processes related to service provision. They need to be fairly well able. It's going to be a reimbursable grant, so they're going to have a fairly good, amount of money available. So what they spend, then we'll go ahead and reimburse them. So just make sure that they have that kind of accounting system, and also make sure that they're used to doing the compliance pieces. So an agency who may be familiar with ESG or has the practice wanting to become an ESG type of agency would be great to connect with. Okay, good. All supportive service applications must meet the following criteria as demonstrated in the Enriched Property Services Plan and Budget, and I'm going to show that. Demonstrate at least 3 years of experience providing affordable housing and or affordable housing related services, have a minimum of 3 years of experience assisting vulnerable individuals, Supportive service applicants have no direct or indirect interest of ownership of an entity that contracts with the NOFO applicant. So there's not a conflict of interest between the two. And actually, I just remembered we're going to talk about the actual documents at the end. So, and then be an active member in the local coordinated entry system, and then have really strong standards of financial accountability. Okay. And that they can serve Georgia. That's important too. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the services plan later on when we talk about attachments. And so we're going to go into that in a little bit. So I am now going to stop talking. I'm sure you're all so happy about that. And we're going to move on to Bryce, who's going to talk to us about the single site supportive housing portion.
Thank you, Alona. Good afternoon, everybody. So for this part of the NOFO, the primary funding source is the National Housing Trust Fund. There may be some home funding available in addition to the $4 million that's available from Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund, as you may know, requires 30-year affordability period with a 30% AMI maximum for residents. And the maximum subsidies are subject to the home subsidy limits. You can use the home cost allocation tool to figure out those maximum per unit limits. And the Housing Trust Fund compliance manual there is linked for your reference. And next slide, please. Thank you. So the priority populations served under this section of the NOFO include this subset of populations. You can review them, but you will designate which subpopulations you're intending to serve. If you're serving folks that are chronically homeless, you must meet the HUD definition of that homelessness and receive your referrals through the local coordinated entry system and continuum of care. Thank you. Within the NOFO and also within the general set-aside guidance, and I'll talk about the general set-aside in a minute, there's references to the different concepts and designs for the projects, highlighting the resident-centered approach and the benefit of increased accessibility features. Also, you need to establish supportive services partnerships, of course, and there's a special rating factor that details what you need to set forth in terms of those partnerships. And there's also a plan, service plan, and budget template that will be available to complete. The budgets template that's there is set for the service providers. So you set forth which service providers you're intending to partner with, and then those service providers detail their annual budgets on that budget template. Next slide, please. Thank you. There are some new underwriting standards for supportive housing here, and the document itself is up on the NOFO website, but I wanted just to briefly mention some of the things that may be new if you haven't had a chance to review them yet. The vacancy rate assumption will be 7%, and market studies should be sure to include other comps that are supportive housing developments. The cash flow, revenue, and expense trends will be the same as they are in other LIHTC developments. The developer fee will also be the same as the QAP, but should you choose to apply any deferred developer fee to the other reserves or funds required, that's encouraged. For operating expenses, we're asking for them to be underwritten at amounts between $8,000 and $10,000 per unit to make sure that there are some long-term financial sustainability associated with the unique costs that might be peculiar to the supportive housing development. The replacement reserves typically aren't funded at the conversion, but we're asking for replacement reserves to be funded in a certain 6 months amount to be funded up front, and then the typical monthly contributions that are required under the QAP will remain the same. So there's upfront funding of the replacement reserves, and then there's an additional fixtures and furnishing reserves, which is there, again, capitalized before conversion to fund furniture for the tenants who are in need of furnishing. And there can be philanthropic sources that assist with half of this reserve. Thank you. If you are applying for single site supportive housing under this NOFO, you will also be applying for LIHTC under the 9% general set aside. And the document linked here, which was published last year, it sets forth some broad standards for the set aside. A lot of those standards are detailed further in the NOFO and they mirror each other. One maybe particular item that's detailed more in the set aside guidance is that when you apply under the set aside, you'll be exempt from the QAP's requirement that has a 25% maximum allowed for folks referrals that are for individuals with disabilities. And so applying under the set aside ways that cap and therefore you're allowed to commit somewhere between 25% to 100% of the units prioritized for referrals for folks who are identified as living with a disability. And as mentioned before, project concepts are also detailed a little bit in that guidance as well. Thank you.
So I'm just going to go back over the post-award requirements. So basically, everything that is really involved with the environmental is going to be a part of both the Home ARP and NHTF funding. Davis-Bacon is primarily just a part of Home ARP, not a part of National Housing Trust Fund. Okay. The project-based vouchers, we went ahead and talked about that. And let me just also mention that, what was the other? It was BABA. That's what it is. BABA is a part of NHTF. So it is a part of that particular part of HUD funding, but it's not a part of Home ARP. Home ARP came before BABA, so it's not a part of that. So Davis-Bacon is a part of Home ARP, but not BABA. Davis-Bacon is not a part of NHTF, but BABA is a part of NHTF. So I hope that is clear as a friend just said, it's clear as mud. I sure hope it's not, but I hope it's super clear that I made it. But if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to let us know. Okay.
And if I can add at that point, we're also yes, you know, we have some questions and answers in the Q&A pipeline regarding some of these things that we'll be putting out, including the applicability of BABA. And we're also contemporaneously working on guidance for BABA implementation within the LIHTC and department as well.
So Brittany just asked a question. If you are awarded NHTF funds along with home funds, will both Davis-Bacon and BABA be required? So yes, home funds, the regular home funds, we are putting as an option with regards to single site supportive housing. So yes, if you're awarded both National Housing Trust Fund and home funds, not home ARP funds, yes, there would be both that would have to be, regarded. So you'd have to do both BABA and Davis-Bacon. Sorry about that. So does BABA, so the 12 plus units is for Davis-Bacon. I am not in any way a BABA expert, so I'm just going to clarify that. You're going to want to talk with your federal compliance consultants with regards to this. So I'm just, Brock, I'm going to tell you that right now. The question is, does BABA kick in at 12 plus NHTF funded units, or would it apply for any amount of funding? So Davis-Bacon kicks in for 12 plus funded units for home ARP and for home. BABA, I believe, is not based on the amount of units that you have, but based on the funding that you're receiving alone. So because it's around making sure that you're purchasing your the cost of the steel and the wood and everything like that. I think it's wood, but definitely steel is being purchased in America, and having source locations as to where that is, where you're sourcing all of your construction
Yes,
costs.
BABA, sorry, BABA does not have like a minimum unit in terms of that 12 unit. We will be issuing a Q&A on this, as well as some additional guidance, but it covers iron, steel, all manufactured products, and so virtually most hard costs of the construction.
Perfect. Thanks, Bryce. I appreciate you saving me there. Starting to go down a really long, not good direction. Okay, so let's talk about emphasis. Okay, guys, I'm going to bring up an emphasis application here. I hope I can get it over here. Nope, it's not moving. So just give me a second. There we go. So emphasis is going to be used for you to submit your applications for the NOFO. It's primarily the same. Everything's the same for both documents. The detailed information in the narratives and attachments are not in emphasis, but will have to be uploaded there. And so also please make sure you submit prior to the 14th, just to make sure that all the technology is working for you. So as you can see, this is not as big as other applications you've probably completed. We do ask for the general oops, sorry. That I thought it was, we're good to go. So the application, oh goodness. This isn't going to be a thing. Okay, there we go. So it's going to have the regular development requirements, building unit information, the tenancy characteristics, rent and income. So this should all look very, that you've seen this before. This should be familiar. And we also have a section for you to go ahead and add your comments and clarifications on certain things. So just know that you have some narrative sections. We do ask for your development team and everyone involved a place to upload your financial information. And again, this is just a test that we put together. There's a section on home ARP with some basic questions for you to answer. If it comes up. There we go. And going over your plan to reach qualified tenants, your plan to support tenants with services, and that you agree to apply for the 2025 tax credit round, etc. National Housing Trust Fund also has something very similar, where you talk about the different populations you're serving, the number of units, and that you agree to, basically it's like a mini certification. We have a section for document upload, and there's going to be a section for your core application, your performance workbook, your service plans, and any additional supporting documentation. Okay. And then we do have a certification at the end for you to essentially electronically sign. So just know that we're going to upload this particular link. It's not something that is going to induce too many heart attacks, but it will definitely be, it's a place for you to upload all of your information. So just make sure your narratives are complete. For Home ARP, I'm going to go over the service plan for Home ARP, and then John is going to go over the service plan for National Housing Trust Fund and single site. So this is an overview of the whole project. Here's the important piece for the first referral to units. HUD has been really, really clear that every population, a part of the 4 QPs, needs to have a referral source. Now that could be the same referral source for all 4 QPs. So you could have between 1 and 4 referral sources for the 4 QPs. They can all be different, or they can all be exactly the same. Some agencies serve all 4 of these qualifying populations. So just make sure that if you do, or if you're using them, that you have an MOU, or you haven't planned to put in place an MOU with them for those 4 QPs, because the only way to get a project-based voucher to be used with with one of the 4 qualifying populations is to have an MOU with that agency for them to be housed in that unit with that voucher because they're eligible. Okay, so just make sure that you're thinking about that. And so we have information for just their name, address, email, and the date the MOU is signed. We know that that's a little precarious for a lot of you because you don't want to have a service agency get all excited about potential and then not have it all work out in case you guys don't happen to get funded. So we understand that there's some one-offs there, but the closest you can to get an MOU and make sure you get those is just we want to make sure that that's part of this application. If you're an active member of the local coordinated entry system, that's important. Referrals to residents. This is a list of where you're referring individuals to in your communities. Resident services and local community service boards are required for your property management teams to know. Okay, so make sure you know who that is. If you're wanting to apply for supportive services, make sure you put the amount here at the end. Again, we're going to put a list of the acceptable supportive services that you can apply for on the NOFO website that we posted at the beginning of the webinar. And I know John posted it just a few minutes ago. So we have that in place. So please check back there. Here's the service plan. This is an overview of just general how you're going to approach participating in the program. Here at the end, though, for those of you who do decide to apply for the optional supportive services, this last box does need to be complete. If you're not applying for supportive services, you do not need to complete it, unless you want to. Absolutely can if you really want to. But I know that you don't want to complete something that you're not using. And again, with the budget, this is just going into detail about the Home ARP funded service provider, any additional service providers who aren't Home ARP funded, and then your property management as well. Okay. And then this is the information that would need to be completed regarding the supportive service, the agency that would be implementing your supportive services. Okay. So we know all of their main information, such as their point of contact, the basic like tax ID number and things like that, and then just a general certification of what they're going to be doing here at the end. Okay, so that is that. 1:45. We're 45 minutes in. And now I'm going to turn it over to John. John, do you want to share your screen? Do you want to do it that way?
Sure. Yep, I'll do that. And there's two questions, I guess, in the chat from Nathan. The NOFO stated that we cannot charge more than 30% on the client since this is a loan. How do you recoup the 70%? Please clarify this for me. So you're probably referencing, and Laura Ann just popped in a response there, but Yeah, especially for the National Housing Trust Fund units, if you're awarded those, and those units have to be, the rent for those units has to be set at 30% of the area median income as a maximum. So that's just part of the federal requirements for that funding source. The home ARP units have slightly different requirements in terms of how the rents can be set. That's also a common requirement for low-income housing tax credit units as well. So it's kind of just a matter of how you put your pro forma together and utilizing the various resources at your disposal to put together an overall sustainable project that allows those units to be at 30%.
John, on all of John,
Yes.
on all of our units, we hope to have, that's why we have the project-based vouchers. That subsidy is supposed to cover the extra 70%. Right?
Great. Yes. So the award of project-based vouchers as well will then require that the tenants are not paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. And so the project-based voucher itself is an operating subsidy on the unit that will help cover the other 70% if you're awarded those vouchers. And then there was another question, is Douglas County part of the jurisdiction area? This might be a question for you, Alona.
No, they're not part of, Douglas County is a part of the balance of state. They did not receive any home ARP funding individually for Douglas County or Douglasville, either of those. And then we have another one, since the NOFO application deadline and the qualification determination deadline are the same, do we need to complete one before the other? Or since the performance workbook is required in both, does submitting the NOFO also count as requesting a qualification determination? It's a solid question.
You'll have to turn in your performance workbook for the LIHTC application according to the LIHTC requirements. And so you can use the same workbook, same document, but submitting it to the NOFO is not going to count for the LIHTC review. The LIHTC team will be reviewing the performance workbook as normal.
I also think the qualification determination is on a rolling basis. And so you can submit it now and you can hear back fairly quickly. Is that not correct, Bryce?
I don't want to commit to what the exact turnaround time is at this point in time, but yes, you can submit it now up until March 14th. And the email and submission instructions are going to be on the tax credit application page, which was linked earlier.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. Can you all see my screen here? I get a verbal confirmation.
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't see everybody's faces. So I just want to go over the single site supportive housing service plan and budget template, which is going to be slightly different from what Alona shared for the home ARP service enriched rental housing services plan and budget template. You can find this document on the NOFO webpage as well. You can go ahead and download it, and it'll give you this document here. And just backing up real quick, I mean, many of y'all are probably quite familiar with supportive housing, and or if you're not, you know, one of the key components of making sure that you have a successful supportive housing project is being able to plan out the supportive services on site over you know, as far into the future as you can, and that requires having strong partnerships with your service provider. It requires kind of answering some key planning questions up front and thinking about outcomes up front, and it requires kind of a just consideration of the overall experience of the tenant and the supportive services that will be available to them. And of course, it requires budget planning in advance. So the point of this document is to give you all the opportunity to plan as you are submitting your application and put together budgets for the supportive services, as well as answer some at least basic questions about what it's going to look like for you to have services on site or services as part of the supportive housing. So this first tab here is just kind of some basic instructions. you will enter in the project name here, the number of supportive services, the number of units with supportive services that will be in the building. You don't need to complete these tabs here because they'll be auto-populated from the other tabs. I will go through or I'm not going to go through this, but I want to just mention that there's the services plan tab here. But that is actually going to be required upon threshold. So let's say your project is awarded through the NOFO, and then it's also awarded through the tax credit round. The threshold deadline happens later on in the year, and that is when this updated services plan will be required to be completed. So you'll see there's quite a few questions here. So it's meant to be comprehensive and detailed. And the questions are kind of going through the program philosophy, roles and responsibilities of each of the key entities involved in the development. What do partnerships look like? What does coordination look like between partners? What is the analysis of the need for services for the intended populations that you're hoping to serve, et cetera, et cetera. So, but this tab is not required for your initial submission. However, the rest of this document is required to be completed. So program summary, this is a required tab for you to complete. You're essentially going to look through here at the options for supportive services that you may be providing on site. Could be childcare, food, mental health services, the list goes on here. And under service provider 1, you're going to identify who's my primary service provider that we're partnering with. You want to enter their name in here, the name of the organization. So we're not talking about an individual name of a person. We're talking about an organization that provides these services professionally. And then you will select, say childcare is offered by that service provider, you would select that option there. And if you have additional partners that you're working with, you can do the same. Maybe you have someone else who's providing food on site, and you would select that there. If you see that there's a service that you're offering that is not listed on our default list here, you can put something, you can select other, and then add an additional note down at the bottom about what that is. Okay, and then we have 5 budget tabs here. As Bryce mentioned before, this is really intended to be completed by the service provider entity themselves. So they're the ones that are going to be doing the work. They're the ones that are going to be managing the programming. They're the ones that are going to be hiring and managing the case managers or whatever the staff structure looks like. So we really want them to be completing this budget tab here so that we're getting as accurate of information as possible. And this is kind of a standard budget, sort of revenue and expenses document here. And you're estimating, of course, but you want to be as close as possible. And so we have a year 1, and we would like for you to complete it all the way through year 5. These tabs are exactly the same, and you'll just complete all 5 budget years here. And as I mentioned before, the totals will populate on this first page here so that we can get a sense of what are your estimated services costs over the next 5 years. So I'll stop sharing unless there's any questions about that.
We're next going to talk about the project-based vouchers. Laura Ann, would you like for me to share my screen with that information, or do you have it on?
Yeah, Elena, you can also just pull up this slide, and then when we're ready to talk through the application, you're welcome to switch over to the application. Thanks for doing that on your screen. So hi folks, happy to see many of you on the call. Wish I saw your faces, but it's okay to just see your little blob with your name. I know it's a busy time, so hopefully this has been productive for you all to learn a little bit more about what the team is going to be looking for during their review of your applications. So as I mentioned during the QAP workshop, we are intending to layer our project-based voucher resources, our additional financing resources, and our tax credit resources, right? So they're easier for you guys to use them all together. And as part of that, we have allowed our project-based voucher application to be submitted in conjunction with this financing opportunity. So I think many of you have heard my previous spiels about project-based vouchers, but essentially the way that HUD allows us to award project-based vouchers is that we can use another competitive process that's not the PBV competition in order to make an award. And so we will be using our home ARP, NHTF, Enriched Property Services NOFO competition to award project-based vouchers. So that will be the competitive piece. And as long as the property meets the other project-based voucher requirements, we can layer on top of that. So that means if you are applying for this notice of funding, you just have to use this project-based voucher application in this notice of funding. You don't have to apply for the property in the upcoming award round, right? So as long as you submit it through this avenue, you do not have to also submit it through the general process for all other properties, right? One thing that I want to flag that's new, if you have done this before, right, and this will look familiar to you, if you have here about, which competitive award reservation, you could just put pending home ARP award or pending NHTF award. Alana, you can scroll down. The one thing I want to flag that is new is our waitlist management and tenant selection plans. This will be easy for you guys to do because you'll have already done it through the other parts of the NOFO, right? But we just need to know who your referral partners are going to be for these units that you're applying for, so that we can go ahead and start processing and planning to establish a future waitlist for this. The other piece for folks who have not filled out an application before, really everything that's on the first page and a half is just like a table or information that you fill in the form. And then everything that's on the second page and a half is things that you have to check to make sure that you meet the project-based voucher standards and then provide supporting documentation for that. So I mentioned the waitlist management and tenant selection plan piece, right? Y'all are submitting that through this NOFO, so you don't have to resubmit it for the PBV section. For the deconcentrating poverty section, we can only award project-based vouchers in a census tract that is under 20% poverty. If it is higher than 20% poverty, it has to meet one of those other criteria. Elena, you can scroll up a little bit. One of the other criteria that's listed on pages 2 and 3 there. And if you are submitting one of those other criteria, we just need documentation that supports that, right? So it can be local government's redevelopment plan. It can be a census tract analysis that shows that the census tract has decreased in poverty over time. We just need some kind of supporting documentation from you guys on that attached to the application. And then likewise for the site and neighborhood standards, we also need documentation that the property meets each of these specific things. So y'all, since y'all are new construction sites, should only focus on this bottom portion that says a new construction site must meet the following standards. Don't worry about the top part. So we need documentation on each of these things. We do not prescribe specific ways that you outline this. Properties have done it in different ways, and we are maintaining that ability to use different sources to show us that each of these things are met. But I will flag that we need each of these things to be met in order to process your application. So make sure that you've got documentation for each of them. I think the last 4 tend to be the hardest for folks to remember to submit documentation on. So Elena, if you want to highlight those, please don't forget those in your application, so it saves us time and we don't have to have back and forth on it. I'm happy to answer any project-based voucher related questions, but overall, that is how you should prepare to complete the application.
Excellent. Thank you. That's perfect. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that information. We're going to answer questions. So one more thing that I am going to add is if you have linked into or clicked on the links that you had in the chat around the NOFO, here's the site. You can also just search it on our DCA website. I hope you guys like our new site. We like it. We're really happy with it. So here at the bottom, here's the NOFO document that we just looked at, which does have the project-based voucher application in Appendix 2. So it's at the end, it's attached. We have our home ARP underwriting guidance and then the service property, the service plan that I had showed you. And then we have the supportive housing underwriting guidance that Bryce went over. And then the service plan for single site that John went over. And then we also have the general set aside guidance. So you guys can link to the whole document here. Here's our Q&A form. So it looks like this. So after this training / Q&A, if you still have additional questions, you can ask us an official question here and we'll post it to the website here. When you guys want those answers, they're going to be posted here, like I said, probably tomorrow at the latest Monday. Okay, we just have to go through that legal review. Here is the next training if you want to attend on Wednesday the 26th. And you can go ahead and register on that page if you click the link. So I just want to make sure that you all were aware of that. Okay.
And
Please
can I add in
note-
can I
Yes,
please add in
definitely, Bryce.
Thank you. Just a quick and gentle reminder. If you do have a question, please submit it through the survey. Please do not email individual staff. If you have a question, it's likely that it will be helpful to all potential applicants, but submitting it through the survey is the only way to ensure that we get to answer it. So please go through that survey. And when we do have responses ready and published, we'll send an email blast about it.
Thanks. Thanks for that reminder, Bryce. That's really, really great. And then also the video of this training is going to be on that DCA YouTube website. And actually, I'll post the YouTube website on the page as well. So like I was saying, plan ahead, be proactive, kind of think through your plans. Long-term sustainability is really important with this just because it's that additional service component that's going to be a part of it. And so that's going to be something to consider for all projects. Work well with your service providers, especially those locally, and think about tenant-focused housing and consider, if you haven't already, have people with lived experience participate in the planning. And the Q&A will be open through Friday, February 28th. Excuse me. We have our next rental housing training. You can find it on the website as well. But if you want to go ahead and sign in, you can do that here. We also have a substantial amendment that's going to be released for public comments. It looks like next week. And so thank you everyone who have already submitted your requests. We have started really updating that substantial amendment. So if any of you have that data, it would be great for you to send it to homearp@dc.ga.gov, or you can send it to me directly. That would be great. And I know that we have several different groups that have requested the focuses on preferences and limitations with the QPs. It will not apply to this funding cycle, but it can apply to the next funding cycle that we do. Okay. And then we have our supportive services information webinars. This is for supportive services only. So if there's any agencies on the webinar that want some specific information around our supportive services application, that would be great. Or if you're wanting to do optional supportive services and just want a little bit more information, this would be great to be a part of. Now that's on the 13th, the day before. So you're welcome to, hop on and make sure you have all the information. But really with what you have for the NOFO, we just want to make sure you have an agency that's connected to your development that can supply the really the needed service support for the funding, because there's a lot of eligibility and pieces that are included, as you know. Then we'll be at the housing symposium. This is all of our emails. And that is
Alona,
it.
I think we've got a couple other questions in the chat. First, John McKnight wants to know when the grant application is due. Can y'all just remind everybody, and somebody maybe put in the chat that specific date?
Yeah, it's the 14th of March.
Yeah, so it's about 8 weeks since we published for public comment and let everybody know this was coming. On Michelle's question with the current administration changes, how it affect funding. So we are operating moving forward as if business is moving forward. So we don't have any guidance right now that says that the funding will not be available. We'll continue to monitor what the new administration puts out and do our best to comply with any changes from the administration. But this funding, particularly the Home ARP funding, and National Housing Trust Fund, is statutorily obligated, right? So that it went through the legislative budgetary process, and we were awarded a particular amount and planning to do what we can to commit as much of that funding to help expand affordable housing options in Georgia this spring. So we're excited, hopefully, to partner with many of you to do that. Clarification, Alona, you see that from John?
The grant opportunity. Do you mean, okay, so the grant opportunity, thanks, John, for that clarification. So there's two. So the grant for supportive services will be due at the end, I think it's the middle of April, or not middle, it's like the 25th of April. It's 4 weeks. So it will be out on the 31st of March, and it will be due by the 25th of April. That is for supportive services only.
Alona, I think because we have the supportive services funding that's attached to the rental housing NOFO. So I think the question is if they need to use that larger supportive services timeline or the rental housing development timeline.
Have to use the rental housing development timeline, which is, thank you for clarifying that, the optional supportive services piece on the NOFO for rental housing with I forget, service provision. There we go. We have so many of them right now. So, but with that, the optional supportive services funding, it's not going to be as detailed of an application as the separate supportive services NOFO. Okay. So if you're doing the optional supportive services with your rental housing NOFO submission, you would just need to do the service plan and finish that all up, and then make sure that you have, it's primarily on the service plan. So does that answer your question, John? I'm sorry that was confusing. Let me know. Give me a thumbs up or
it does.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry. No,
that's
thanks y'all for clarifying.
Absolutely. And by the way, y'all, I did unmute everyone. So if you do want to just come off mute and answer a question, not answer, if you want to ask a question, that's fine too. We are here for you for the next 20 minutes.
I did have a question on the NHTF side. thank you for the presentation. I keep getting more and more clear as the days go on, so I really appreciate it. If my understanding is that, and we're looking to serve folks in homelessness, so my understanding was any of the NHTF funded units would have to be serving chronically homeless folks, and those referrals would have to come through the COC. Any other units? We were also looking to work with an additional service provider who would, who's not the COC, but works with folks experiencing homelessness, and they might not be necessarily chronically homeless. Could we still like include, as long as they're not the NHTF funded units, could we still include those units? And if so, would those be considered permanent supportive housing units or not? I don't know if that makes sense at all.
So Alona, I don't know if you could pull up the slide that has the target populations that we want to serve with the single site supportive housing, but those
Absolutely.
are the populations, those are the eligible populations that can be funded through the National Housing Trust Fund section. So chronically homeless is one of those options. It's not the only population that can be served through the trust fund. So that's, I think, part of your question. And then can you ask the second part of your question again, and just around like, could you?
Yeah. So then we were planning on also having the NHTF funded units be serving chronically homeless, which is one of the categories. But then we were also planning on serving folks who might be, like just housing insecure in some other way, that are doubling up in a room or something like that. And so we want to serve those folks as well. I understand those wouldn't be able to be funded through the NHTF. Unless they were in one of those other categories, which I don't think they necessarily would be. But my understanding would be that we could still include them as part of the project. And I don't know if they would be considered permanent supportive housing units, but
To be home ARP units.
they could be. Okay.
Yeah, like it's
So-
possible that, so just look at the eligibility requirements for all of the different funding sources and see if those people that you're trying to serve fall into any of those categories. If they somehow don't, there's no restriction on why you couldn't serve them in the building as well. They just may not be units that could be funded through these
Okay.
sources.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah, if you want to serve a broader population, Brock, you may want to consider the home ARP funding, because
Okay.
that is more generalized. There would be one wait list though for all 4 qualifying populations. So there would be a chance that someone who is at risk of homelessness would be on the list ahead of someone who is maybe chronically homeless. But so there is a chance that could happen. At least now how we have it, we're working on changing it, as you know. So so that would be the only thing that would probably be a little bit of a one-off, but I know you guys are wanting to do lots of different things. So so that's a really good thing. But I think maybe what I would recommend is kind of talk through with your property management as far as working through the eligibility of all those different populations and how to serve them. Because I think with the capital stack, you want it to make sense there, but also you want to make sure that when it's implemented, that your property management staff retains their mental health. So with lots of different eligibility pieces and all those compliance pieces, that may be a lot too. So I would talk it through your property management group as well, just to make sure that they're on board with it.
Okay. Because if we went the home ARP route, then all of our referring agents, like if we had partners, the COC and then another referring agency, all of them there would just be a single wait list for all units.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that's helpful.
And we definitely encourage you to engage with your coordinated entry and COC. That's great. They would just refer to a unit like the other agencies would, who are on your list of referral agents.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
And let me also add, just generally to that, the single site supportive housing definition is between 25% and 100%. And if you had less than 100%, it's not going to preclude any concepts, as long as you're complying with other programs. If you had 90%, you could still, it's not going to preclude some other services for the 10%, right? But I would also look carefully at the rating factor for Housing Trust Fund and how it scores that percentage between 25% and 100%. There is an item in the rating factor that you should review.
Also, just to let y'all know, if you wanted to have, there's no, because of the broad range of home ARP units and because they're not necessarily considered a group with disabilities, they don't fall under the Olmsted requirements. And so technically, if you really wanted to, you could have a whole property that was 100% home ARP units, depending on how you guys want to do that. So just be aware of that, that are qualifying populations. So we had a question also come up that since it's 70% or more of the qualifying populations or 30% or less, of the general low income, populations. And I showed y'all at the QAP workshop what that looked like. It could be up to 100% QP units if you'd like to do that. So depends on what your pro forma looks like and how you're using all of your income tab, taking a look at that, but it is a possibility if you want to request that. We had some questions come up. When will the general 2025 project-based voucher application be posted? I think that's what we have in the application, is it not? No, it's not. It's 2024. Okay.
Oh, so Elena, the general is like any non-home ARP, non-single site supportive housing application. Amelia, that's what I understood your question to be. Or excuse me, Anna Marie.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong there, please correct me, but the general project-based voucher application for all other properties not associated with this NOFO will be released this month. We're just waiting on final internal review. So thank you guys for your patience.
John asked, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I saw the question about the operating expenses. Yes, from John. And that is what the single site supportive housing sets aside, and home ARP will be following the QAP if I'm correct, which has a minimum per unit operating expense. But obviously looking at long-term financial sustainability, and when we write the QAP minimum, some folks may think that's what we're expecting to see, but we're actually looking for long-term financial sustainability.
Well, and Bryce, wouldn't that kind of be a two-part piece too? Because we're looking at operating expenses as a whole, just in general in the department. Just actually, I'm starting to dig a hole there. For home ARP, like Bryce said, it's according to the QAP, but you can choose to do the 8,000 to 10,000 per unit if you choose to, because like Bryce said, it's the minimum, what is it, 4,500 minimum for Atlanta? I think it's something like that.
It's
5,000.
tiered, excuse me. Yeah, tiered per unit amounts. But yes, that is in the QAP just a minimum.
Part of the reason behind that is because home ARP units, we were just looking at the different populations. We didn't know if higher OPEX was necessarily needed because the range of different populations who would be living in home ARP units is quite broad. So for initially, we just thought that the home ARP units could go ahead and go by the QAP standards.
Thanks, Alona and Bryce. No, that's helpful. That answers my question. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we are adequately capturing costs in our budget to make sure that costs for supportive services, resident service resident service coordinator, things like that. That we're making sure we're capturing that appropriately, so our service provider can be compensated. So no, thank you for addressing that.
Just to let you all know, as a little teaser, for those of you who are attending the Georgia Affordable Housing Conference, it's after everything is due, but we will be having a supportive housing panel that's going to talk, and we have someone from CSH who's scheduled to talk. I just booked the Interagency Council on Homelessness, that ED, and then someone from Columbia Residential to talk about all the supportive services options. And I know Catherine will probably talk about helping to fund them too. So, and we're also looking at doing another institute coming up in 2025 and more years. So just know that we have lots more coming out of DCA for supportive housing and resident service support. Next question. Are existing RAD project-based vouchers eligible to be counted as part of HOMARP requirements, or RAD project-based vouchers not eligible? That's a great question, Jose. I do believe that they are eligible. We'll have to look at the RAD piece. Here's the thing is that when you look at what it says in our regulations, we need to make sure that there's that full transition from like full, and I forget the number. I think it's like the transition from, I think it's like APPA or something like that into full RAD. We need to make sure that that has transitioned, because they can't be considered public housing. We can't build on like a public housing. We can't build public housing. Let me put it that way. We cannot build public housing units. We can, however, build RAD units that have the vouchers that transition to tenant-based vouchers. That would be an okay thing. We would just need to make sure that those units are covered as far as feasibility and sustainability long-term. So if you want to put those project-based vouchers on a RAD deal, that should be possible, but we'll include that question in our list of questions and post it to the website. Okay, just to give you a for sure answer. Anything else, Laura Ann? Do you have any thoughts on that? Okay.
No, I think we need to follow up over public comment. Q&A.
Okay. Thanks, John. John has my back. Has the emphasis link gone live yet? No, not yet. It should be live by tomorrow. I'm gonna update the website actually after this call. So we just need to get our marketing and communications team to let it go, but we'll have it go live. But as you can see, it's not super difficult. It will take a little time, but not a whole lot. Any other questions? You guys officially have 7 more minutes. Or you can go off mute. You can even go off camera. We can see your lovely faces.
I would add with emphasis, just make sure if you haven't got your credentials and all that, make sure your emphasis login is all established before the date of the deadline.
That's great. Thank you for saying that, Bryce. I'm a little bit more new to emphasis than you are, so thank you for saying that. Brock?
Sorry, can I since there isn't anybody else asking, I might chime in with a couple more here. We were wondering, so we were planning to possibly fund some of our like case management services through the project itself, which would push up, but I think it would be considered services rather than OpEx, and so I'm basically wondering if there's a particular way we should reflect that, or if that's discouraged or anything like that. Does that question make sense? I can explain more too.
No, yeah, Brock. So this has come up in terms of the construction of our core app and how we're able to capture services. Let me follow up with our tax credit and capital markets underwriters on this. It is standing question that we've had. Right now, of course, folks are just including it in operating expenses. But it would be helpful for you guys, especially with this notice of funding, to be able to capture the specific amount that you're paying for services in that core application. Noted, you already are doing that through the services budget, right? So that additional document, but heard and internally figuring out the best way to handle that with our core application.
Okay. And just to be
There-
clear, my main concern too is that it would be, I didn't want us to push above that. I think it would maybe push us above the maximum if we go the NHTF route. So maybe you understood that, but that's kind of was one of my concerns with it.
And Brock, I would just encourage you to, in the interim, and for everyone on the call, like put a note. You know, I know there's sections in the core app where you can put notes. So put a note about that specific challenge if it does push you above the threshold.
Okay, understood.
And I can also add, Brock, you know, in the revenue and expenses tab on the core app, there are line items for supportive services, on-site service coordinator, and things of that related to services. So that's all presently under the OpEx budget. But if we'll take another look at it, as Laura Ann said, and if we have any answers to that, we'll put that through the Q&A as well.
That's one of the reasons why we asked for the full core application, is because there's formulas in there that they all contribute to different parts. So if you leave something out, it may not give us the full picture. So, yeah. Okay, we have 3 minutes. The countdown has begun. Well, I'm gonna, in the meantime,
Any more questions?
Yeah, I know. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to put our contact information here, so that way y'all have it in case you don't. I'm assuming you all do, but who knows? And just to let y'all know too, we got an email that the housing symposium, which is actually through the Office of Homeless and Special Needs, was kind of funky. So we went ahead and I let that office know, so then that way they can remedy that. And yeah, we hope you guys consider going. It's the week before the Georgia Affordable Housing Conference. It's going to be in Savannah as well. And again, it's more toward the services side. So it's more toward like coordinated entry. They're going to be talking about like the ESG funding. And the COC. So if you want to kind of know more about that part of what is going on in Georgia, we would highly encourage you to attend. And, you know, heck, you can make it a week-long thing. You can go for one conference, stay through the weekend, and go to the other. Their conference is right after, you know, St. Patrick's Day. So you could stay for St. Patrick's Day and stay for 2 weeks. So, so many options. We have and Lauren said that the form stack for questions. So you all have access to that too. And all of these links are also on our website for the NOFO, and we can probably put that in the chat again so you guys can grab that if you want to before you leave. Okay. Well, we have 1 more minute left. Any other comments, Bryce, John, Laura Ann?
Thanks
No
everybody for
last-
You know,
Thank
definitely,
you.
we definitely appreciate your interest in this unique opportunity to help folks who need some support, and appreciate your participation, and we'll be following up with Q&As.
We appreciate your grace, because this is also our first foray into a very exciting new thing that we're doing, or actually the old is now new again. So yeah, we're excited to have you all participate and be a part of the ride. So, okay, well, Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you in a week and a half if you come to the next training. Thanks.